program will be a model M and the control rule, and then the technical model checking will verify whether the probe indicator are whole or are triggered by the transition system M. And if this relationship hold, then generate the control requirement tree. So this is the overall architecture for the solution. The rest of the slide will try to explicate all of the components of this solution. That means how to model the Deontic process, how to model the control rule, and how to develop the program that compare control rule against the Deontic process and generate control requirements.
Now in half an hour.
Yeah, I have another slide more. So now the result of the research. If you look at the dissertation on chapter 4, I spent like 40 pages to build formal foundation for the research. And the result of that chapter is a formalism, what I call the Deontic patronage. This formalism includes two components. The first component is a multiple model logic, including Deontic logic at the central.
Multiple
Modal.
Modal,
Multiple
not model,
okay.
modal, modal logic,
Okay.
multimodal logic.
Right. I'm trying to make the pronunciation of that word. Okay, the multiple modal logic, including Deontic logic at the central. Besides that, I also utilize the temporal logic, action logic, and institutionalized logic. And the second component is the patronage component. The patronage component here is very simple. It's based essentially on the concept of event and condition net. And for the purpose of representation and simulation. The thing for me, the essential thing here is my main contribution is to define the two different components in a single semantic framework based on the concept of state transition system. I use the state transition system in order to explain the formal semantic of modal logic. And I use state transition system in order to explain the patronage. So this is the semantic aspect of the logic and also kind of the process aspect of the patronage.
Go back and just repeat that sentence again.
Okay.
Yeah.
To make sure that you say it very clearly.
Right. The key thing here is that the two components of the formalism is integrated or is defined based on a single semantic framework. The semantic framework here I use is the state transition system. So if we look at the modal logic, typically we will provide the semantic modal logic based on the notion of possible word. The possible word. That means in the current word, you have certain relation to some other word by some kinds of transition or some kind of movement or some kind of relation. But if you view it slightly different, this is actually a state transition system. A word is a state, and the relation is a transition. You see, so the word is the state in my notion, and the relation is the transition between states. So I view the semantic of modal logic as a state transition system. And patronage state transition system is obvious.
If I may just insert a supporting comment there, that in logic, when they say semantics, they mean something mathematically. So they're talking about sets. And so it was Alfred Tarski that defines formal semantics for first-order logic, so that the semantics of individuals are certain elements of sets, and semantics of predicates are either sets or relations. But then it became a challenge to define the semantics for modal logics, such as, in this case, the Deontics. It is obliged that there are modal logics in the past and future. Modal logics refer to characteristics of sentences. So a sentence may be true, it's possibly true, it's necessarily true. And it was the logician Saul Kripke that finally came up with the semantics for these modal logics that was based on a notion that's called possible worlds. More recently, possible worlds, which seem kind of mysterious, it seems like you're inventing a construct but that has been made more tractable by relating possible worlds to transition systems, where the possible world is a path through a set of states.
Right.
And so there is now an 800-page book called The Handbook of Modal Logic, which I'm happy to loan out to anybody that wants to read it. But this is a long discussion, but there is hard support for this, for what he's saying on this one slide.
Right.
So and
If you look at the dissertation, you will see the chapter with names of notation. That chapter is about the semantic of the modal logic. The key thing is to define every element of the language. The main thing I try to achieve in this dissertation is the balance between the theoretical rigors of the dissertation and the applicability of a business problem. That's the key issue. And somehow I'm more focused on the theoretical rigor of the dissertation. Every bit of component, every component in the dissertation has been defined rigorously based on the formal foundation. And I'm chuckling a lot. Professors sometimes say me, you need to get out of that in order to return to the business problem. But I try to pursue that objective. Okay. So, here, the second contribution of the research is the methods for analyzing control based on Deontic process model. As I said before, most of the methods for verification of control in internal or interorganizational procedure based on principles from accounting. And what they look at is they apply the principle and to see the flows of document and see whether there is enough document move between the parties, there is enough checking activity in the procedure or not, and so on. This is the first time the research pointing out that Deontic analysis is the foundation for analyzing interorganizational control. So what I do here, I provide an analytical framework for analysis of control based on the Deontic process model. The framework comprises two aspects. The first is about the Deontic relationship among the parties. I provide a taxonomy of Deontic relationship, include the bilateral contract, unilateral contract, single obligation, and so forth. You can see this in chapter 5 of the dissertation. There is a long argument in order to come up with this taxonomy. And then I provide the taxonomies of the Deontic chain. What kind of Deontic chain may happen in the Deontic process? So you may imagine there are two aspects of the Deontic process. The first is about the static aspect or the structural aspect of the process. And the second is about the dynamic aspect, the movement or the change of the Deontic relation. So then I will identify for each kind of Deontic chain, I identify the scope of effect depend on the Deontic relationship. For instance, a very simple activity. When the seller delivers goods to the carrier, at the same time, he fulfills his obligation to the buyer. And at the same time, he gets a right to collect payment from the bank or from any agent that is authorized by the seller. So you see a single activity here for many different Deontic effects. One effect is to discharge the obligation that he has with the seller. Another is to entitle him a right to collect payment. So for any kinds of Deontic chain, I identify the scope of effect defined by the Deontic relationship that I identified before. And then I identify the potential force for each of the parties involved in the process. And then identify control requirements in order to limit this potential force. And finally, I arrange the certain potential force and certain control requirements based on the nature of the transaction into control principle. Even though I started the process is short like that, it's really explained like that, but this whole chapter 5 is about 60 pages just to explain the process of analyzing the Deontic process to come up with the set of 10 control principles. And the result of this is the 10 control principles that cover the entire life cycle of a transaction. Start from secure the creation of the transaction, transfer of the transaction, modification of the transaction somehow, and discharge of the transaction. And the core or change may be by performative action, like a speech,